You're watching 12 WKRC TV, a new generation of news. 12 Newsmakers starts now.
Good morning and welcome to Newsmakers. My intention for months has been that on the Sunday immediately before elections, Newsmakers would feature the two candidates for the mayor in Cincinnati. Charlie Luken accepted the invitation immediately. Courtis Fuller's campaign said he would not be available. Thinking it was a problem with schedules, I offered to tape on a different day. I was told that was not the issue. I offered to interview each candidate separately, giving each half of the program. Mr. Fuller's campaign rejected that format as well. I offered to interview Mr. Fuller outside the studio at a time and place of his choice. He also turned that down. I was told that Mr. Fuller simply did not want to appear on Newsmakers again during the campaign. Throughout these discussions, I made it clear that his refusal to participate would not trump my invitation to Mr. Luken. Given the fact that I have only one candidate for the first part of this morning's program, I have decided to move this interview to this Sunday, saving next Sunday, right before the elections, to interview the candidates running for school board. I am joined this morning by Charlie Luken, the current mayor of Cincinnati and the Democratic nominee this fall. Charlie, welcome back to Newsmakers.
Thank you. Good morning, Dan.
Charlie, you've presented yourself as the experienced candidate in this situation, and we all know you've been involved in city politics, mayor back in the 80s, mayor again, Congress. If you have all of that experience, why are we in this much trouble?
Well, Dan, I think we are in a lot of trouble, and I view the decades of the 90s as a decade of real inaction where the city was neglected, the urban core was neglected. I mean, if you go back to the years when I was the mayor in the 80s, we lost population certainly, but the economy was strong. We were building new office buildings. The neighborhood development was progressing. I think the 90s were a real lackluster period for the city of Cincinnati. And since I've been back, I mean, the first thing I had to do was clean up remember the traffic gate where we had all the streets that weren't being repaired. We had to deal with the Genesis issue and cut off funding to them. So it's been a year and a half of dealing with really a lot of problems that were kind of left on the plate. But through it all, I think we've made some progress, and I'm energized about the future and the changes in the government, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't be running for the office.
Well, in fact, if you are elected, or no matter who's elected, let's just take a look at what you're facing. You have no city manager, so as of December 1, John Shirey is resigning.
Right.
The assistant city manager, Richard Mendez, has taken a job in another city. I don't know if he's gone physically yet. He is. Okay. No economic development director, no permanent economic development director. You have at least 2 new council members, maybe more. This is a lot of loose ends out there in the city at a critical moment. How long is it going to take for this new mayor to put any of that into place?
But Dan, first of all, let me relate this to your first question, which is how do we get in this shape? And my view of that situation is it presents a great opportunity to clean the slate. And when I talk about my experience, I think I'm in a position to be able to handle this situation, to make this, what appears to be a negative, turn it into a real opportunity for the city. New team, new city manager, new mayor working together, new city council. I mean, this seems to me to be a great opportunity for the city. Now, on the question that you've asked, how long to get to a city manager, I would think 2 months, 3 months, but we do have, and I know who they are, we do have people inside City Hall who I feel perfectly comfortable saying, okay, for a month or 2, you're the interim city manager.
Do you know who that person is?
I know the list, but I'm not going to reveal it here this morning. But I have a list in my own mind of possibilities to handle that job on an interim basis. But it would only be for a month or 2, if that.
Okay. If on another front, on a much broader front, not so much specifically government front, coming out of the April riots, you appointed Cincinnati Can.
Right.
One of the promises was we would see real results in 4 months.
Well,
what are they?
I don't know that one of the promises was we would see real results in 4 months, but I can tell you that I believe we have seen good results. We have identified disparities in the criminal justice system that have been eliminated.
We did a show on that.
We have identified.
They've been eliminated? They've already been taken care of?
Some of them have been taken care of by the city already. Okay. With the new prosecutor, whose name is Ernie McAdams, and I think you've probably had him on your show before. They have identified things like Issue 5, which they are supporting, which will dramatically change not only the police and fire chief, but the other operations at City Hall.
What's your position on issue 5?
I support it.
Okay.
I support issue 5. They have also begun, and this is begun, this holistic approach to police community relations. But while they're doing this, you got the Justice Department out here doing their own review, and they only recently this week made their findings known to the citizens of Cincinnati. And I think that we are moving quickly in the right direction on these issues.
This is the Justice Department report, 23-page preliminary report. This isn't a final report. What's your basic reaction to this?
My reaction to it is good. In other words, we recognize we have to make changes in the Cincinnati Police Division, and these are helpful suggestions that we plan to work with the Justice Department to accomplish. Some of them I like. Some of them, well, I think we have to make citizens' complaints more understandable. We've got to, if a citizen has a complaint, figure out a way to make certain the citizen understands the process and that the citizen feels the complaint is being taken seriously. We've got to figure...
And not intimidated.
And not intimidated. And we've got to figure out a way to better keep records on police officers so we can determine where there are red flags, not to identify bad cops necessarily, but just a police officer that might be in the wrong situation over an extended period of time. But let me give you one I don't agree with.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you next.
The one recommendation is that the police need better relations with community councils. I've been to hundreds of community councils, and I don't know that I've ever been to one where the community council and the entire body doesn't embrace their neighborhood officer and the Cincinnati Police Division. So I have no problem working on that subject, but you go to any community council in Cincinnati and they're going to be pretty high on the Cincinnati Police.
You know, one of the people I interviewed when this came out, interviewed them on Thursday, was Cecil Thomas, who now heads the Cincinnati Human Relations Commission, but a cop for 27 years, the head of the Sentinels, and he showed me a report in 1999 that the Sentinels put out that except for the MACE section of this. He was surprised about the MACE section of this report. But the rest of it basically was pretty much the same, amazingly the same. You had an internal person making a report backed by an organization in 1999. Why wasn't some of that listened to?
In the first place, Dan, I don't think I was around when that report was made, but I'm not excusing myself. When I was running for council in 1999, in November of 1999, I told people that I would continue to look at the police division, look at it carefully, and ask the Justice Department to come in if it was appropriate. I did that, and as far as I know, no other member of council has really even given an opinion on whether that's a good idea or not. But I'm not familiar with the Sentinel report. I would also say that the Justice Department is an independent outside voice. The Sentinels would appear to be a combatant.
Yeah, and we all know
that makes a difference.
As a consultant myself, the farther away I am, the more people think I know what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Okay. I want to go back. You were a guest on, actually it was New Year's Eve, and on this show, and I want to go back and play a clip of something you told me on that Newsmakers at that time. Let's take a listen to this.
I was in Detroit for the Motor City Bowl, and I'm sitting next to a woman, and the woman says, I said, you live in Detroit? She said, no, absolutely not. I live in, and she mentioned some suburb that was on the edge of Detroit, and she was very adamant that she did not live in. People in Cincinnati, still, if you're out of here, or people say, I live in Cincinnati. If people lose that connect, I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, that's a conceptual thing, Dan, but I think it's vitally important that people remain vested in the future of the urban center.
You know, the question now is, 10 months later, have we lost a lot of that connect between the city and the suburbs? And I hosted
You mean because of April?
Because of April, and I was out in Mason and Deerfield Township earlier this week for a candidates night that I was emceeing. And I got to tell you, I was amazed at how many slaps at the city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County in general, but the slaps at city of Cincinnati were made in that. And I thought about that quote right away.
Yeah, well, Dan, I don't think there's any question that the events of April didn't do us any good in terms of that issue. But the principle is as important today as it was when we just talked about it. There is nothing more critical than for the region to accept the notion that the vitality of the urban core is critical to all of us.
Well, given that April has now taken place, what do we do to secure and mend that sort of fence with our region?
I'm going to my answer to that is really kind of related to this election, because I think the mayor of Cincinnati, even though the mayor will only represent the 330,000 in the whole region, has got to speak as if he, in this case, is the mayor of the region. And the mayor has got to do some of the things that I've tried to do in the last 2 years, go out to Claremont County Chamber of Commerce. Because when I went out to Chamber of Commerce in Claremont County, they were lined up to take those shots at the city. But you know what? After they got to dialogue about it, it wasn't that bad. So I'm thinking that the mayor, one of the mayor's jobs is going to be to impress upon the region the importance of the vitality of the center. Now, I have not in any way, shape, or form given up on things like downtown housing, East End housing, Mount Auburn housing. I mean, these still are great jewels in urban revitalization. And those, to me, represent some wins that the city can get that's going to change that perception. But look, I'm not going to fool anybody by saying we didn't take a hit.
Okay. I want to lay aside some of the, those tough sort of social issues, relational issues, looking at brick and mortar sorts of things, the banks, the convention center. What's the one thing that, what is your highest priority in moving something forward right now that is stalled or in trouble?
I would say two things, Dan. One would be the banks, because I think that face of the city on that riverfront, when I talk about a win for the city, when people look at that and they see what that's going to be for a lot of people, their impression of Cincinnati, and we can't give up on the banks, and the city's going to have to work with the county to jumpstart it. The economy's obviously hurt us. The second thing is on the other end of downtown, I think over the Rhine and the revitalization there. I mean, there are 400 empty buildings in over the Rhine. There are a number of people now interested with the Denhart bankruptcy and doing something major to make that a mixed income.
What role should the city play in that?
Well, the city's going to have to put up some money. I mean, that's what the city's going to have to do. I don't think the city wants to go out and buy those buildings. And in fact, as you know, there are a lot of private interests going around to try to accumulate those, to try to make that more of a mixed income neighborhood. And the vision is the banks, downtown, a mixed income neighborhood and over the Rhine, right up to the university, which is another big employer in the city. And the university is spending upwards of $600 million over the next few years to try to revitalize some of those neighborhoods. So that's the vision, and that's what I would say in 4 years I'd like to be back here and say, that's what we did.
Well, we will see if you're back here, but
we will see.
First, on 10 nights from now at Board of Elections, we'll find out if you're here even
or
a year
somewhere.
from now talking about this. Thank
Thanks.
you for being here. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
Even for people who follow politics closely, there is one type of election that is really frustrating: judges. How do you figure out who they are and what difference it makes who you vote for? After the break, some clues. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I remember the first time I voted back in 1964 in Northern Kentucky. I thought I was ready, but when I got into the booth, I was suddenly faced with a race for Kentucky Railroad Commissioner. Yikes. Ever since, I've vowed to be totally prepared before every election. Despite that resolve, the one type of contest that I have never figured out how to be prepared for is a race for judge. I read the material put out by the candidates and the parties. I read the League of Women Voters guide every year. This is available at all public library branches, by the way. I've even invited judicial candidates on this show with the secret agenda that maybe I'd figure it out. But then when I got them here, I had to struggle to figure out what questions I could ask them that they could actually answer given judicial ethics. Races are taking place this year in 7 Hamilton County Municipal Court districts. And in 3 of those districts, candidates are running unopposed, so we don't even have to talk about that. The 4 other districts have contested races. To discuss the process and the races, I am joined this morning by 2 members of the Cincinnati Bar Association. Jeffery Peck is the chair of the Cincinnati Bar Association's Judicial Candidate Rating and Endorsement Committee. He is an attorney with Thompson, Hine & Flory. John Norwine is the executive director of the Cincinnati Bar Association. Welcome to Newsmakers.
Dan, thanks. Nice to be here.
Okay, you've heard my bit. I find this difficult as an average voter, non-lawyer, don't go to court. Even as a reporter, I don't cover court sorts of things. What do you recommend? How do you think the average voter should try to figure out who to vote for?
Well, it is a bit more difficult, Dan. You're right, because of the factors that you mentioned. There are constraints on what the candidates can say.
And explain those a little bit.
Well, there are constraints in the judicial canons, as well as the general canons of ethics that lawyers must follow, that constrain and tell them what they can say. For instance, a candidate is not allowed to say how he or she will rule on a certain matter in advance, and that's something
even in theory. If I present them with a theoretical case, they can't tell me how they'll, right?
That's correct, and I think you found that when you
Right.
tried to interview them before. So the general thing is that people should do what they do in every other type of race, which is to seek out as much information from sources they trust as they can find, and that includes the information sheets from the League of Women Voters. It includes the newspapers who do endorsements. We, of course,
And we're going to
do
talk
an
about
endorsement
those.
process.
Okay, John, let me ask you a little bit about that endorsement process. What is the process the bar goes through in order to evaluate candidates and ultimately come to an endorsement?
We use a 15-person committee, and we try to balance it as closely as possible with Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
Okay.
Those people will go out and we assign them in teams to talk to people who've been in front of these judges or know these candidates who have professional experience with them. We also do a bar poll of 5,000 local attorneys. We send out and ask them to rate the various judges and candidates in different categories.
But if you have a sitting judge, then you've got people who have seen a track record for that person as a judge. If it's a non-incumbent, a person who's never served as judge, they're a lawyer, it's a different dynamic though, right? Because the qualities you need as a judge are different than you need as a lawyer. Is that true?
I think that most of the time the good lawyer makes a good judge because of the diligence and the fact that you stay after the job. The key there is that sometimes good lawyers don't have the right demeanor. They are too aggressive, they aren't balanced, they're overly zealous at times, and they're not as impartial as you'd like someone to be on the bench.
Okay. And the Bar Association, and you headed the committee this year,
That's correct.
does finally come to endorsing candidates. You make decisions, you put this out. If I remember correctly, a few years ago, you used to give sort of rankings of, it wasn't A, B, C, D, but it was highly recommended. You don't do that anymore, right?
That's correct.
Why not?
We modified the process because we felt that the endorsement versus the non-endorsement, or in situations where we endorse preferred in a situation where there's 2 endorsements, is actually more helpful to the public and gives them more direction that they can use when they go into the voting booth.
Okay. Let's take a look at some of these actual races this year. In District 3, and let's remind people that municipal court was broken up a number of years ago, so that people no longer run countywide, they run in specific sections of the county. So District 3, which is sort of in the north central part of Hamilton County, we have a sitting judge, Carla Grady, running against Ed Felson, who is a local lawyer. What did the Bar Association find in this race?
Well, the endorsement was for Judge Grady, and the committee did not endorse Mr. Felson.
Can you tell us what was it that you could say, what can you tell me about Judge Grady that brought you to an endorsement?
Well, Judge Grady received uniformly high praise from lawyers in both the civil and criminal areas and on both sides of the equation for her work as a judge. And as I said, the praise was uniform. In Mr. Felson's situation, the there was recognition by a number of lawyers in the bar that were interviewed as part of the process that he is somebody who is willing to take up unpopular causes. He's a very zealous representative, but there were concerns that came out through the research process that zealousness may hinder his ability to see both sides of the issue. There were attorneys who expressed concern about whether or not he had the proper demeanor for performance as a judge.
This gets to that question I was raising before. You know, you were saying that every good attorney is probably a good, but if someone's such an advocate and bores in, the thing about a judge is they have to be able to listen to both sides. There's another demeanor here. There's another approach that a judge has to have that not all lawyers have to have.
Yeah, what the popular wisdom is that if you're a prosecutor and you go onto the bench, you're always going to be pro-police. You're always going to be finding defendants guilty. And vice versa, if you're a defense attorney, it goes back the other way. Well, you won't believe the police. You want to find defendants not guilty. And that doesn't always happen because there are people who can step on the bench and can be impartial. It's just tougher for some of them.
Let me just very quickly, has the bar ever made a recommendation, not recommended somebody who then ended up on the bench and you've been pleasantly surprised?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want to make that clear. These are not foolproof. District 4, southeastern part of Hamilton County, Judge Ethna Cooper, you endorsed. You did not endorse Deborah Price Rambo.
That's correct.
What can you tell me about Judge Cooper?
Judge Cooper has just been on the bench for a little over a year at this point. And,
so it's an appointed position?
Yes, and by all reports has done an excellent job. One attorney described her as being in the top 5 or 10% of all new judges that have come onto the bench in the county in recent years. Her opponent, Deborah Price Rambo, may be the most intelligent of all the candidates up this year. She's a primarily tax and benefits attorney, and I mean, she's somebody of sterling character, but at this point, she's never really been in the courtroom, and we felt that we could not endorse her because she just doesn't have the courtroom or trial experience.
Okay, District 5 in the northeast section of Hamilton County, Darlene Green Camine and Heather Stein Russell. Neither person is a sitting judge. As far as I know, neither person has ever been on the bench. They're both lawyers. In this particular case, the Bar Association endorsed Darlene Camine.
Correct.
Why?
She has extensive experience as a magistrate in juvenile court, 17 years. And again, this was a situation where during her tenure there, the attorneys found that she had excellent preparation, diligence, temperament for the job, and received very high marks.
What about Heather Stein Russell, who you did not endorse?
Well, Ms. Russell's been a prosecutor for the past 17 years. She doesn't have any civil experience. She has received praise for her work as a prosecutor, but there has been criticism from judges and lawyers about overzealousness, and there was some concern on the part of the committee and the way that she responded to that criticism.
I'm aware of time here, so I'm going to move on to District 7, and this is in western Hamilton County. Endorsed both Judge James Patrick Kenny, a sitting judge, and Robert C. Winkler, but you prefer Judge Kinney. Why? You endorse both?
That's correct.
Because?
Well, in Judge Kenny's case, he has done a very good job. Again, the lawyers have been uniform in their praise of him. Mr. Winkler is not yet a judge, but in his practice, again, has received high marks for integrity.
I have to say, there's lots of Winklers already on the bench, and in these sorts of, looking at this from a campaign point of view, name recognition is a lot of it, and this is a different Winkler. I want to just point that out, right?
That's correct.
Okay. You prefer Kenny?
The committee came out with a preferential endorsement for Kenny.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. Is there any other group besides you that maybe has a different point of view?
I know that the Post tracked our endorsements pretty much exactly.
Okay.
I don't think the Inquirer endorses at all this year into races.
We're just about out of time. I want to thank you for being here, bringing a little light to this very cloudy subject. So we'll see what happens. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. No matter what poll you look at, people think education is the #1 priority. Next week, candidates running for the Cincinnati School Board. Have a good week. Stay right.
Railroad and the vital role